This is episode 3 of GothCast. This is Dr. Sanders.
And this is Robbie Gore.
All right, this is going to be the first part of a multi-part series of videos talking about different artists related to this band, but it's going to be the first episode of our Bauhaus segments.
Yes, the famous or infamous, depending on how you look at them, Bauhaus.
Yeah, this is a band that pretty much every single goth person knows. It's another one of those essential...
I mean, I feel like it's almost more influential than, anything we've talked about thus far. Goth wouldn't exist without Bauhaus.
You know, people credit them. Some people credit them as like the first really fully 100% Gothic band, you know?
I disagree.
I disagree with that. Yeah, there's maybe we'll talk about some of that later, but
it definitely, the genre wouldn't exist without them. I think.
It definitely helped cement it
to
be what it is. And so we're going to be talking about every single album ever. No, we're going to be talking about everything up to Sky's Gone Out. So let's talk about before in the flat field. And what's before in the flat field, Robert?
Okay, well, I'll give a little backstory on Bauhaus.
Mm-hmm.
Formed in 1978. Members Daniel Ash, Kevin Haskins, and David J. had pretty much been playing in various revolving bands. Yeah. Ash has been trying to get Murphy to sing for them for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
Murphy finally agrees. They have a rehearsal. They hit it off. They co-wrote some songs together in that rehearsal. Granted, Peter Murphy has never done anything musical in his life up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, everything's working for them. But yeah, after a very short period of time, they decide they want to start recording. So we get what is the first single, which is what every goth person thinks about when they think about Bauhaus, which is Bela Lugosi's Dead.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of those songs that kind of transcends the band, I'm listening to goth music or it's the kind of used to reference Gothic music as a whole. It's just
definitely.
Bela Lugosi's Dead.
Well, it's also funny because Bela Lugosi's Dead sounds to me like very different from In the Flat Field.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. The single Bela Lugosi's Dead, it did set a lot of precedents for goth fans. It's a very long song. It has very dark lyrics. It has kind of a spooky, kind of echoey nature about it, and I really like that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's extremely different than In the Flat Field, which came out, I think, like a year later, or not even a full year later, or something like that.
I think it's a really interesting song, though, because it almost kind of points to Gothic Rock's roots in psychedelia, because Bela Lugosi's Dead is very experimental, very progressive, very Pink Floyd-esque, lots of reverb, echoes, lots of avant-garde noises kind of thrown into the song.
Yeah, I could see that. And it also seems like, especially, it's hard not to compare this to In the Flat Field in a way, because it's kind of hard to compare to anything else, because Bauhaus is kind of the subject. But it is weird that this one is kind of more psychedelic and a little bit more experimental in that way, whereas I feel like In the Flat Field is largely a echoey punk album in a weird
definitely.
way. It's much more influenced by punk, and I feel like this is kind of lacking that.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Doesn't mean it's worse or anything like that. But
do we want to get right into In the Flat Field?
I want to talk a little more about Bela. I want to throw out some trivia for Bela Lugosi's Dead, because it has so much trivia.
There's a lot to talk about with Bela Lugosi's Dead.
So one thing I want to talk about was that this song was used in the Saturday Night Live skit for Goth Talk. And I always thought that was so funny, the segments. We're having his living funeral. I'm dead. All this stuff's hilarious.
Okay, so it's also used in 1985 cult vampire film
The Hunger. Yeah, with David Bowie. That's a good movie. Yeah, they're actually in the opening sequence.
Yeah, I know. They don't they do basically a skit of Bela Lugosi kind of.
Well, they just do a playback. It's kind of like a music video.
Okay.
So. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like a smoky club and everything.
Yep.
I actually recommend that movie if you haven't seen it.
Oh, it's a really good movie.
Yeah. It's directed by, is it Terry Scott, or is that his name? Toby Scott? What's his name? It's Ridley Scott's brother. Tony Scott. That's what it is. Yeah, Tony Scott directed it, so it looks like a Ridley Scott movie.
I have a hard time not to recommending any movie that has David Bowie in it to people.
Yeah.
I feel like any movie that they've always been involved with has just been good. Like,
what about what's that one?
You gonna talk about The Prestige?
No, I'm talking about what's it called? Like Band Crash or something like that. He makes a cameo at the end.
I actually haven't seen that one.
It's like some totally by the numbers like band movie where it's like kids, and he makes an appearance at the end.
Maybe that's why I think that everything that he's been in is good.
You haven't seen that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about with this single in general. The B-side to Bela Lugosi's Dead is Boys. On some versions, they include a demo version of
Dark Entries. Yeah, it's like a minute and a half long.
Yeah, it's definitely
a demo.
I wouldn't have included it on there, but I mean, they did.
I don't know. It's kind of weird.
It didn't, it did not work out for them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's a weird thing to put on there.
But I think definitely one of the biggest things about this single is that in addition to setting up the sound that people would associate with Bauhaus, is that it sets up the image that people would associate with Bauhaus.
Spooky and dark and everything like that.
And the sleeve art it's a still from the film The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's recorded live in the studio. David J. It claims that he wrote all the lyrics for it. And it's been used in like tons of like we mentioned in the Saturday Night Live skit, the Hunger.
I know that Peter Murphy, I don't know how he feels about it now, but I know that at one point he felt a little bit seemingly a little bitter towards the song in a weird way, or how people had interpreted it, you know, and what they had thought about his band as a result of it.
Well, I think it's interesting. Well, like everybody credits this with being the beginning of goth, but it's almost like, I mean, the lyrical content is like anti-goth. Bela Lugosi's dead. Like, the
you look at that,
image of horror is dead. That's essentially what they're saying.
I mean, you can look at that in a few different ways, but I see what you're saying. Yeah. But it's pretty much on every playlist for every goth radio station, or I mean, even on like freaking Pandora and freaking Spotify and all that crap. It's always like one of the first 3 songs that's on classic goth songs. And
if you put goth into Pandora, this song is going to come up. Like,
exactly. And so
unfortunately, so will She Wants Revenge.
So true. That's so irritating. But it's kind of hard to not feel maybe a little bit burnt out on the song after hearing it so much.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people would be like, oh, they're playing goth music. Oh, they're playing Bela Lugosi's Dead. Kind of like rolling their eyes about it. And I can understand how some people feel that way, but it's a freaking good song.
No, it's a great song. Yeah. And I think another thing that's really important about it is that it sets up the way that they go on to make music from that point forward, because they record everything live in the studio, a couple takes, and at that point it's clear to them that they know what artistic vision they want for their sound, and so they self-produce in the flat field.
Yeah, which I think I'll get to my opinions on that, but let's get into In the Flat Field.
Okay. Yeah, In the Flat Field. And again, it's going to be another episode where Donnie and I disagree.
Yeah, this is not my favorite Bauhaus album.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not that I think it's a bad album. I'll get my opinion out of the way first for this. I think that this is definitely where you can see a lot of punk influence, right?
Oh, definitely.
This was just coming off of punk. And you can hear that a lot. The guitar, especially on this album, not necessarily droning, but it's almost like background noise in a lot of the songs, where it's just kind of hitting the guitar, getting the notes out there, and then the bass and drums really rely on driving like the vocals.
Yeah. And
of course, there's a few songs where, Dark Entries and stuff, like it's all about the guitar, and Telegram Sam. Well, even though Telegram Sam isn't on the original album. But
it's such a good song, though.
Yeah, it's a good song, though. It's a single. But it...
You should mention that's a T-Rex cover.
Yeah, it's a T-Rex cover. But... So there are a few songs that have like driving guitar, but for the most part, it's kind of like an aimless sort of guitar sound, and it's not bad. But I just find that that's not exactly my thing for guitar. I tend to like guitar that's a little more not necessarily straightforward, but kind of more driving.
Well, you want an album that's guitar oriented, and this album is definitely less guitar oriented. If anything, this album really is about, and granted, there's not heavy production on it. It's all about production. It's about achieving a certain sound.
It's theatrical.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. Peter Murphy's voice isn't necessarily operatic or anything like that. In fact, it's almost it's very raw because it's almost like he's kind of untrained in a way, especially on this album. Yeah. Whereas on even Mask, even one album later, he got a lot better at singing. And so this whole album feels very raw and a lot like just a dark themed punk album.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely good.
Yeah.
Do I think that the production is maybe a little dry sounding? It's not extremely full. It's not like, this isn't something that you put on your speakers and it explodes out of your speakers. It's something that has an energy.
Yeah.
It definitely has an energy, but when it's not sonically driven.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I disagree a little bit. Okay. Well, first of all, I should mention that I'm biased about this album a little bit because I have nostalgia, for this album.
Mm-hmm.
I had never really listened to goth music before. Bauhaus really liked the first gothic band I listened to, and I feel like that's true for like a lot of people. But, of course I heard Bela Lugosi's dead, so like I got to look up Bauhaus and find In the Flat Field.
And you're like, where's Bela Lugosi's dead? It's not on any album,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, previously, like I'd never really heard or like really understood what goth music was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of stuff like Marilyn Manson and like Ministry and
okay.
And so I heard Bela Lugosi's dead, and I was like, Bela Lugosi's dead is very interesting. So it had my intrigue. And by the time I heard In the Flat Field, I'd already really been into punk music. And so this album for me, like, it's punk, but it's not punk. If you took away the way they produced the album, it would sound like a punk album.
Yeah.
But because they produced it the way they did, it came out sounding more ethereal, more dark, more spooky. But I just love this album because I feel like you said, not every song is like super guitar oriented, but I feel like there's so many driving songs on the album. Like Dark Entries is so good. I'm not a big fan of Double Dare.
Really? I actually like that song.
I was a little bored by it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I like In the Flat Field a lot. I like God in Alcove.
Oh, that's a good song.
Oh, yeah. Nerves is a great song. I mean, Telegram Sam's not on the album, but like
it's on
my version
it's
has
on
it.
Basically, any CD release of it is going to include all the singles because the original release of the album only has 9 songs on it.
Yeah.
Basically ends with Nerves.
Yeah.
But then pretty much ever since then, it's been re-released with extra songs on it.
Yeah. I mean, I like The Spy in the Cab. I mean, even songs that I'm not like huge fans of, like Double Dare, or a huge fan of, I should say.
Yeah.
I still like. It's enjoyable to me to listen to. And so for me, this was the first thing that I ever associated with goth, and it was the first thing that I listened to that was called goth that I liked.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I think it may not really be a gothic record. I actually would argue that it's not. Like, I kind of agree with you that it's more of a punk record than it is a goth record.
I think that this is definitely one of those kind of bridging points because I do feel like this is definitely a goth album, right?
I feel like we're moving in that direction.
Because I feel like what's it called? Post-punk was obviously the right before this.
Yeah.
And most of the post-punk bands evolved into what would be known as goth bands.
Yeah.
And I feel
either
like
goth or new wave.
Yeah,
they
exactly,
either went that direction.
But I feel like Bauhaus definitely skipped the whole post-punk thing.
Oh, definitely.
And so I felt like they were too far away from punk to be considered punk. Like they were doing something that's very dark, very unique.
Yeah.
And this album is kind of that almost like turning point of where like a lot of these bands, because this is 1980, so let's see, when did The Cure? Didn't 17 Seconds come out in like 81 or maybe it was 80? Yeah, so it was right around the same time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these bands were changing right around this time, and I feel like Bauhaus was kind of on the cutting edge of doing this, and I feel like this album really falls in that gray area of like transition.
Yeah.
And I feel like almost because of the aesthetics and because of the energy in this album, which is so different than punk. It's not. Yeah. The energy is completely.
No, the energy is very different.
It's extremely different.
But okay, this is why I make the argument that I don't think they were trying to make a goth record.
You don't think?
I don't think so.
Really?
I think they got pushed into that a little bit by the movement because, I mean, you say yourself 17 Seconds comes out almost around the same time, and to me that's very blatantly gothic. Like in this album, I feel like Peter Murphy talks about how they were just trying to be avant-garde, but I really feel like they were very interested in art schools and stuff like that. They had a background with that kind of thing. I mean, they named their band after a 1920s German, art movement. I think they were really trying to just be like an artsy kind of band, and eventually they would evolve more into a gothic band. But at least for this album, I don't feel like they were trying to be gothic or what we associate with goth music, but because of their fashion, because of their image, because of their art aesthetic associations, I feel like you kind of have to call it a goth album.
Okay, I guess in that way. Yeah. I can see what you're saying. Do I agree with it? Kind of. but I don't have to.
Of course not.
Yeah. Of course, this album goes on to be in the Flatfield.
Yeah.
And so pretty much everyone today universally accepts it as like a masterpiece. But I mean, at the time, apparently this album wasn't very positively reviewed. Like, it was pretty negative, and a lot of people called it aimless.
Well, okay, so as far as critical success goes, all the critics hated it. I think they got one good review from a critic, but it still goes to say that it topped the indie charts for a week when it came out.
Yeah.
So it was a successful album commercially, maybe not critically.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it was so successful commercially that they immediately had to leave their record label because their record label couldn't support them anymore. 4AD, that was the last time they worked with them.
Isn't that crazy, though?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they were ahead of the movement. Like the critics didn't get it. Like they're probably just listen to whatever's on the charts or whatever's like. I mean, think about the early, like late 70s, early 80s. They're probably just...
It was 1980 when this comes out.
Was it doing coke to disco still? Like something like that?
Kind of, yeah. Like disco's still kind of a thing, but it's fading a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
Van Halen's album comes out. So yeah, this album came out in a pretty weird time. Yeah. And it definitely helped spark a whole movement. All right, so now we're going to do our news segment for this episode. And we're going to do a little bit of a different kind of news segment. So
kind of conglomerate.
Yeah, because Halloween's coming up and everything.
There's lots of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a few like little things and talk about some events. So I'll let you take it.
Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, there's a company called Cinespia who does film screenings at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. At least that's where they screen them during the summer or early fall. Then they move to a new location. But while they are still at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, they're currently doing their Halloween films. Some films that they're going to be screening there are Dawn of the Dead, Donnie Darko, and Rocky Horror Picture Show. If you've seen these movies or you haven't seen these movies, either way, if you've never seen them screened on an actual projector, it's just a beautiful experience to see a movie the way it was meant to be seen. I feel like some of these movies are so old that so many of us have only seen them on DVD or on a computer or laptop.
Especially on nowadays, everyone just Netflix everything on their phone when they're sleeping.
But these movies were made back when movies were meant to be seen in a theater, and this is a perfect opportunity to go see these movies the way they were meant to be seen, and it works because they're Halloween movies. It's in a cemetery. I mean, what more could you want as a goth?
Yep, I agree with that. I think we're going to try and go to the Dawn of the Dead one.
Yeah.
No offense to Rocky Horror Picture Show, but I've already seen that in theaters twice.
Yeah.
So there's nothing against that. And of course, it's always a huge event because that one is actually on Halloween.
Yeah.
So that's going to be packed.
Plus, there are weekly Rocky Horror Picture Show screenings in every art house theater.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like it's been done.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good movie.
It is.
Yeah, and it has a... I'm probably actually going to talk about that on the actual YouTube show.
Yeah.
GothCast video.
Yeah.
Just search that on YouTube.
Also, by the way, you can find us on Instagram at GothCast.
And you can find us on Facebook at GothCast, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can also check the website, GothCast Radio. Are we done plugging everything? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, cool. So...
That's GothCastRadio.com.
Sorry, GothCastRadio.com. That's all one word, no hyphens, no underscores.
Cool.
Is that covered? Right?
Yeah.
As far as Donnie Darko, I get it. A lot of people are really into that movie. Oh, the idea of traveling back in time so you can die so everything could be right,
and he's also possibly schizophrenic.
Yeah. Oh man, I know. I've had some people who just want to talk so deep into that movie, and I remember what the director says about everything. I'm just like, okay, it's cool, but I've never been the biggest fan of that movie. As far as Dawn of the Dead though, I love that series of movies.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at how Night of the Living Dead, and then Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, And then I think it's like Land of the Dead, and then Diary of the Dead. And, whatever I think there's even a newer one than that.
And then there's of course like the spoofs like Shaun of the Dead and
yeah. Well, Return of the Living Dead is something that most people would think is part of that series, but it's not.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with. It's like basically supposed to be a kind of like that, you know, like kind of like it's like Transmorphers,
the B movie version of
Yeah, but most people, it seems like a lot of people actually like Return of the Living Dead more than they enjoy
the Dawn of the Dead series.
Yeah. And I get that it's a lot faster paced movie. It's a 80s one. I will really look forward to actually going to see Dawn of the Dead projected, just because I like that movie so much. I do wish it was Day of the Dead. I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
Like Dawn of the Dead is classic.
Yeah.
And so is Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
But I think as a movie, Day of the Dead's the best one.
I probably agree with you on that. But I'm just glad that we can even see Dawn of the Dead on a screening, in a cemetery.
Yeah, man, movies are getting weird. I know that there's been a boost in movies, tickets and sales and everything like that. But
a lot of those boosts are coming from art house theaters and companies like Cinespia who are screening movies in like odd places.
Try to make it feel worth it.
Yeah.
Because, man, I do not feel like it's worth it when I go pay $14 to sit in a movie theater. That's minus Cokes or popcorn or anything. Like, you don't even get to have the movie experience unless you're spending like $40.
And it's like the classic corny, like dad story, but I just always remember my dad telling me, like, go see a movie when he was a kid. He was like, you paid $5 or something and you got to see 2 movies.
Yeah.
That's how it works. He's like, now you pay $14 and you get kicked out of the theater if you try and stay and see another movie. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's kind of frustrating. We'll probably talk more about that when we're probably going to cover a movie on the podcast pretty soon.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to talk about is, I think it just opened or is coming out soon, and that's Hotel Transylvania 2. Now, I wanted to cover this because I know that it seems like a really dumb movie, right? You're like, Hotel Transylvania, it's obviously like a kid's movie or whatever. But I think it's good that they are making movies like this.
No, I agree. I saw Hotel Transylvania. Actually, I liked it. It wasn't, it's obviously a kid's film, and, it's got all the tropes of children's movies, and obviously the plot's not very complicated, but I enjoyed it. It was something different. It wasn't the same kids movie that you see every year come out. Like, you don't see kids movies come out during Halloween usually.
The one I thought was really bad, the Igor or whatever one that came out like that. Because I try to see some of these movies to kind of get an idea. I like it whenever they try to introduce like a spooky character as a lovable character, because obviously a lot of the people get typecast in these movies, and they say you get typecast in the world, you also get typecast in these movies, as goth characters, as darker characters.
Yep.
And they're starting to do movies where say the grumpy character or the character who wears all black is actually kind of a lovable one, because people love misfits now. Like with hipsters and all that stuff, they're starting to be like, oh, that's me, like I'm grumpy.
Well, what I kind of liked about Hotel Transylvania, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a little girl, and she's raised by her single dad who's a vampire, and she falls in love with a boy who's not a vampire, and her dad's like, you can't do that, and it's it's a whole hidden agenda of being accepting of other cultures kind of thing thrown in there. And
I do like that it's reversed, instead of it being like, oh, it's the creepy guy who's dark and mysterious or whatever, like the father did, the gun toting, hey, get away from my daughter.
It's the opposite way around. The creepy people are like, no, stay away from
You're not creepy, like. And so I think that's good that they present those characters as extremely likable, and I think that's really good, because kids are gonna learn at a very young age that somebody who wears all black is into kind of different things than, say, the characters from Frozen.
Yeah, is not a serial killer.
Exactly. And I think that's really important that movies come out. And I know that that's kind of their agenda, right? That's kind of and it's also very marketable. I like that they are using all the classic monster movies and things like that. I'm not happy about this movie. So surprisingly, I think a lot of people would expect me to be like, oh, screw that or something.
No, I kind of am too.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have something we agree on in this episode.
I know, seriously. So I think that's it for... Oh, I just want to mention really quick, Disney's starting their Halloween thing. So if you want to go to the Haunted Mansion, it's going to be Nightmare Before Christmas.
All decked out, which will continue all the way through December.
Yeah, so you can do the Nightmare Before Christmas thing, and then of
course, we have, Universal and Knott's are doing their Halloween thing,
doing all that. So this is going to really put this episode in a very particular place. Then... the last thing we wanted to comment on, and this is probably the weirdest thing
but perhaps the most interesting thing in our news segment today.
Yeah. So, Robert, have you ever wanted to eat a goth hamburger?
Yeah, I've never really thought about it, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's surprising. I think about it every day of my life. Burger King is doing a Halloween burger, and it's all black. And so the bun, like they put dye in the bun and make it completely black. So you can have like a black goth burger. They're not calling it the goth burger, but everyone else is calling it the goth burger.
So, if you're ever out with your friends and they feel like eating Chinese and you just wish you could eat something a little spookier.
Yeah,
go to Burger King.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a really, really funny story. Apparently, they've already had it in Japan for a while.
Yeah. So it's now coming to the U.S.
That's right. Of course, only seasonally. So that's our new segment.
All right. That's it.
All right. So now we're going to talk about Mask.
Yep.
And now I got to admit, right off the bat, I like this album better. I know. I said it blasphemy, right? Because In the Flat Field's a classic. But I like Mask better.
Well, okay. I told you before that I disagreed with you about In the Flat Field. I think In the Flat Field is a good album. I have a lot of nostalgia for the album. It's like my first Gothic album that I ever really listened to. I think this is a much more mature album. I think sonically, production-wise, like they definitely know what they're going for at this point. I think the songwriting is more solid. Peter Murphy's singing is more solid. So I have to agree with you. Strictly musically speaking, this is the better album.
Okay, so musically speaking.
Yes.
Okay. Mask expanded on In the Flat Field sound to a very large degree, adding keyboards, acoustic guitars, it had slower melodies,
saxophone.
Yeah, that's a weird one. It's not my favorite instrument, but it's utilized well here.
No, I think it works in the song.
Yeah, and so it's crazy that I think this was just a year later, or 2 years, I think.
And
something around there. But it was a very short amount of time. Especially back then, that was. You turn around albums in a year or two, and you have to write them all, and they would usually be released
definitely
a very short while after. But I think Mask is great in expanding that sound, and that's why I like it. It kind of takes what the first album did. It still has, some songs have that really kind of raw, kind of crazy, chaotic
it still sounds
energy.
Like Bauhaus.
Yeah,
we're not seeing the dramatic departure from a sound like we talked about last week, like with Sisters of Mercy. It's not like there's a new album and all of a sudden we're like, where's this band that we knew before?
Yeah, and so you have songs like The Passion of Lovers. I love the guitar in that, and it's really great. And then Kick in the Eye, which is obviously like one of the most popular songs ever.
Well, it's a great song. I mean,
yeah. And one of the weird, they have these really weird...
It's like a disco song, Gothic.
It is. That's what I think is the weirdest thing about this. You have a very danceable record in some way, but you have this rock element to it, and this kind of like it's a Gothic rock album, and it's kind of moving away from the punk a little bit. It's still
definitely.
there, but it has like this classic rock in it, and it's really strange. And Daniel Ash, his guitar on this, I think is a lot better.
Oh, definitely.
And
he stepped up. He's no longer a punk guitarist at this point, and he's
and
that's the real deal.
And like I said, like the guitar.
Not to say that punk guitarists can't be.
In the Flat Field's guitar is very unique, right?
Yeah.
It's basically psychedelic punk rock,
but
in a dark mood. It's like echoey, and it's more about setting a mood. This one I feel is not about setting a mood, but the guitar actually starts off some of the songs. It drives songs, and it's a very unique sound because he's blending a lot of dance and the punk and the rock and roll.
This album feels less like an art album to me, whereas In the Flat Field definitely feels like an art album.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally agree with that. And yeah, maybe the kind of idea or the concept behind it is maybe a little bit less to the forefront.
Yeah.
Maybe it feels like a little less of like a whole package or a whole idea, because In the Flat Field, if there's one thing that album succeeded at, is making so that
it's consistent.
Yeah. And so you would know, like, just hearing a song, you'd be like, that's probably off of In the Flat Field. Like, even if you weren't really familiar, like, all those songs sound similar.
Yeah.
Not just in their notes, but in the way that they're produced, in the way that their mood is kind of the same, the way the vocals are delivered. And Mask is a little bit more all over the place. It has double track vocals. It has more harmonies and things like that. It has keyboards.
Yep.
And each song kind of brings something different. That's what I think I like about this one.
No, I would agree with you. And it paid off for them because, I mean, critically, this album was very well reviewed compared to their last album.
Yeah.
Someone referred to it as a masterpiece when it came out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put it right out there right now. This is not my favorite Bauhaus album, right?
Yeah.
This is definitely one that I can put on, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and just listen to it all the way through.
Yeah.
And just my taste, but I can't really do that within the flat field.
No, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, and so I think that because of the way that this one's done, it's a very easy to listen to album, or at least it's easier to listen to than you don't have to be in like
it's definitely easier to listen to in the flat field,
and in a pop sense, Yeah, because
that's kind of almost what I appreciate about in the flat field, though. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's not an easy listen. Like
it's its own little like world you kind of have to be into. You have to be kind of the mood for that.
It's kind of like when you like go see an art house movie. Like you don't go to it knowing that you're just gonna sit down and be able to pay attention to everything. Like you have to be in the mood for like an art house film. Like and I kind of feel like that's what that album's like. Whereas this feels more like
going out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're both good for different reasons.
Oh, yeah.
It was really strange. I had a different idea of this album before I really sat down and listened to it very hard. I felt Bauhaus had just kind of taken in the flat field and just kind of popped it up a little bit, just kind of cleaned it up. And I thought that for a long time. It was only until recently that I really saw that this album was its kind of own thing. It's a band that...
No, I agree.
It's a band that developed. It wasn't just doing the same thing twice.
Oh, definitely.
And that was kind of what I had seen it as before, because it was kind of driving and it kind of had the same kind of tempo and mood and everything, and they still were kind of doing similar songs, but then I just realized how much of a jump this album was.
Oh, it's a massive leap for them.
Yeah, and so I really got to applaud them for that. And of course we're going to see that later, and
I have to applaud them just for being self-produced. Again, this album's self-produced. They know exactly what sound they're going for.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do as a band, to go into the studio. Like, it's one thing to write songs and to, like, go in the studio. I mean, there's a reason producers exist. Bands have demos for stuff. They've got rough ideas for songs, but they're not really sure how everything should fit together. But one thing Bauhaus does, and they do well, is they know what record they're trying to make. They know when they go into the studio.
Yeah. I got to give them props for that. I know most bands today can't even do that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so...
And when was the last time an album came out today that was self-produced?
Was it Miley Cyrus, right? She produces it. Katy Perry, she does all that.
Yeah, sure.
And then you have, I just want to mention, you have some weird songs. In Fear of Fear, a very weird song.
Yeah.
So they have just some, like, the experimental stuff on here is really good.
Yeah.
But if you're coming right off in the flat field, this is gonna be a little bit of a shock to your system, definitely. In a weird way, just because if you're expecting in the flat field part 2,
it's definitely
this not is not it. And there's still elements of it, it still has some energy to it, but it's a very precise driving energy. So
no, I completely agree.
I like it better than the flat field. Putting it out there.
I like that the album art was actually drawn by Daniel Ash himself.
Yeah, what a strange album art it is, right? It's like a crown drawing. It looks like really different.
Oh yeah,
and you could tell that I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the fact that they went from like an all black album.
I feel like everything Bauhaus does is intentional.
You think so?
I kind of think so. Like,
yeah, I think it was a statement in a weird way.
I feel like they're a very deliberate band. Like, and that's why I feel like Peter Murphy, there's a lot of him lashing out at interviewers and critics and stuff about questions that they ask. Yeah,
where they might seem obvious or something like that. Yeah, but I mean, just compare the two covers. In the flat field has a very artsy photograph of a nude man. It has a very strong image.
Yeah.
And then you have basically a cartoon man, and it's black and white, but then the overbearing color that you're going to associate with it is a white background, right? And so it's almost not exactly the opposite, but it's kind of the antithesis of what the first one was.
It's like the inverse, but not exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it's still artful cover in that it's kind of expresses an emotion. It's a strong image, but it's like not this delicate kind of poetic thing.
Oh, definitely not.
And so I think that was a smart move by them. These albums, are totally different, but so similar, and it's so hard to explain unless you really listen to them.
No, I agree, and I think the move was a good move. Like critically, it was successful. You know, if we talk about commercially, it was also successful. It was number 29 on the U.S. club charts. Like,
Oof.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good for a Gothic album.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point, especially in the U.S.
Just to be in the top 100 as a Gothic album is a big thing.
Yeah. That's my opinion on Mask. Now we're coming to the part of the podcast that's most important to me. We talk about The Sky's Gone Out.
It's definitely most important to Donnie.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite Bauhaus album, and this is one I think is totally a transitional album. I think it's the least talked about album by Bauhaus.
Oh, it's definitely the least talked about.
Yeah.
You can't almost find any information about it at all. Like,
yeah, even you can find a few things, but it's not really as much as you can with the other ones. And so
it's one of those albums. Oh, I almost gotta appreciate. It's one of those albums where you pretty much just have to listen to it and form your own opinion about it. Like,
that's true. It's a really in between album. Okay,
Yeah.
So this album still has some of that kind of rawness from their first stuff, and then Burning from the Inside.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of talk about briefly here. Is that it's a very poppy album. You know, it's a very streamlined kind of album. They definitely got their songwriting chops and like everything down by the time they done that album. And this one's kind of in between that. So it's has some of that kind of like more streamlined songwriting and, you know, very strong choruses and everything like that.
There's strong songwriting, but it lacks poppiness, I feel like, this
Kinda,
album.
yeah, I could see that. I mean, I like the song Spirit.
Yeah.
That song is obviously a very straightforward kind of song compared to what they had been doing.
Oh, definitely.
And it's pretty poppy, in my opinion. A little bit cheesy in some ways, but I love it. I love that song so much. And then, of course, the All We Ever Wanted Was Everything. And that song is, in my opinion, perfect. In fact, that song alone could be the reason that this is my favorite Bauhaus album. Because
I could agree with that, because honestly, that's like, I think the best song on the album.
That song, in particular, like out of any of their other songs, and most other songs, that song really speaks to me. Yeah. You know, that whole like cram every week into a day.
Yep.
Like that's how I feel like a lot of the time, where it's like where just time is going so fast that you have to do all this stuff in such a small amount of time. It just feels like it just means so much to me. Like everything in that song, I can't even explain it.
Well, I think it's probably one of Peter Murphy's more emotional lyrical songs.
Oh, I absolutely think so.
And that's, I think, where I see growth in this album is perhaps in lyrical content.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's actually overlooked, because a lot of the critics talk about the music on this album, and I get it's not as consistent as maybe their last two albums are.
No, I don't think so. I think it's spotty.
Yeah.
But I think
but there's still growth there.
Absolutely.
Like, the lyrics are definitely like Peter Murphy is becoming a serious lyrical songwriter.
Yeah. And they don't seem like they're afraid to do the more delicate ones.
Yeah.
You know? And you can definitely see when a band is kind of like shoehorning in the slow song, you know, because you have a whole album of really hard stuff and they're like, this is the slow one, right?
Yeah.
And this album has multiple ones where they're not afraid to slow it down and kind of mess with the formula a little bit more or combine the formula, you know, maybe do some pop stuff and maybe do some harder stuff.
Well, that's something that I honestly really appreciate about Bauhaus in general, is just that I feel like they're a band that's not afraid to do what they want as a band. Like every career decision they've made, I feel like at least most of them are very deliberate. Mm-hmm. They're very sure of what they want from their albums. You know, maybe this album isn't quite as deliberate as the other ones are, but I still think that there's growth there, and I think that there's depth there. Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate that this album in particular is not talked about very much. Yeah.
Like I said, I can understand why. Just the other albums are more loud in what they do. Yeah. They're more deliberate in what they do. But I just really, I don't know what it is about this one, but I just really connect with this one. If I'm kind of not feeling like some of the stuff, I'm like maybe listen to Mask and I'm just like kind of getting sick of it or something like that. I put on this one, I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember why I love this band so much. Yeah. They kind of do that part song thing where they make a song into many parts. So they do the 3 shadows, and I think the first one is just instrumental, you know, and I like it. It's great. It's cool. It's just Daniel and Ash kind of mess around on the guitar and stuff, and then they have the 2 other ones, and I feel
each one's very different.
They're extremely different. In fact, it's almost kind of confusing as to why they needed to be associated.
Part 1, Part 2, Part 3.
Yeah. So that is really confusing. They could have just been 3 songs, in my opinion, or they could have combined them maybe a little bit better.
They could have mixed them in a way where it was like,
they could just have one long part, or you know, the first shadow, the second shadow, the third shadow.
Yeah.
I don't know why that bugs me or why I want that to be that way, but it does. I think it's just because
I think it's because you like that album that much.
I think maybe that's what it is. You just get, you're like, you listen to something long enough and you're like, don't they see that? You know, but yeah, this album I think it's the right blend for me. When we talk about Burning from the Inside, it is going to be like the album, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be like where In the Flat Field is for most like traditional goths, like when they're like, I'm like totally into traditional goth music, like this. In the Flat Field is it, right? Burning from the Inside is kind of the other one that like a lot of people, it's like maybe if they're into more of kind of the poppy Cure kind of sound, or they're maybe
like
into
new wave and stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. That's tended to be the album to go to, and we'll see why that is. Mm-hmm. Another thing I want to mention, we'll talk about this album in the next one. Press Eject and Give Me the Tape. Yeah, and that's the live album. Yeah, it was originally packaged with this. With This Guy's Gone Out. We'll talk more about that, but I just thought it was interesting to mention that this was where it was released, in case people have trouble placing these albums, because especially with the live albums,
definitely,
and all that stuff, it gets a little bit confusing.
Live albums always get confusing in any band's discography,
because
they always seem to come out at odd times, and
they'll come out like 2 tours after they were done with it, you know, because the album's from 1981, so it's kind of weird. Like, that's when it was recorded, and then this is like 1983, I think, or 82. So, so This Guy's Gone Out. I just want to say that album, it means so much to me.
It's 1982, by the way.
It's right. Best year, right? Blade Runner came out.
Yep.
Right? That's the best year. So, I love that movie. We'll talk more about that. But
you'll hear lots about Donnie's.
It's going to be a whole podcast that's Blade Runner. But yeah, I want to make clear that I really enjoy this, especially if you heard me like ragging on In the Flat Field. This is definitely my sort of In the Flat Field. Like, as far as Gothic culture, this is like the album I associate very strongly with that part of my life.
Yeah, no, I get you. I feel like In the Flat Field for me is what this album is for you. Like,
so that's maybe it's because I have a more gentle side, Robert.
Yeah.
Let's take from Burning from the Inside. So 1983. We're gonna disagree on this.
Yeah,
just right off the bat.
It seems to be our spiel.
I cannot believe that we disagree on this album. I really cannot. Well, why don't you say your case? How do you feel about Burning from the Inside?
Yeah, I don't really care for Burning from the Inside. At least as a Bauhaus record, I feel like I felt like Mask was already a departure from their sound that they developed, and I feel like Burning from the Inside is a further departure, and I feel like evidence of that is the fact that Peter Murphy is so little involved in this album. He has pneumonia to begin with before they go into recording the album, so he can't do a lot of the singing, so he doesn't end up singing a lot of the tracks. The other band members, Ash,
and Haskins,
David J., they end up writing most of the material for the album, and I think it kind of shows. It feels more like, I don't know, the Love and Rockets album than it does like a...
Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily sound exactly like a Love and Rockets album.
Not exactly, but like...
But I get what you're saying, that they handled most of the song... Not that they didn't before, but they did almost all of it on this album. And it does sound pretty different than Mask or In the Flat Field. For me, I really like this album. Like I said, Sky's Gone Out is my favorite one, and I felt like this one definitely gears it more towards the very melodic, very maybe pop-oriented kind of side of Bauhaus, and I think it's really good. In fact, this is, like I said, In the Flat Field and Burning from the Inside are probably the 2 most popular albums by this band. I can see why, because this one, has, of course, the anthem that pretty much I've heard every single goth girl say when it comes on is "She's in Parties." This is my song, So that song is extremely popular. Yeah. And then you have other songs like King Volcano and Hope. I know you don't like the song Hope.
I don't like King Volcano either.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez. Why don't you like Hope?
It drags on for me so much. If it's a pop record, I don't understand why like it takes them 45 seconds to get into the vocals.
Yeah, it takes. Actually, I think it's a half of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes them before that part comes in.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah, in some ways, I guess it maybe feels a little bit unfinished.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's my criticism of it. What I loved about Bauhaus is that they had a clear idea of what they want their image and sound to be every time they went to the studio. And I feel like starting from Mask, going forward, we don't have that as much. They don't know what they're going to do going into the studio. They're kind of going into the studio and writing songs in the studio. They're not coming into the studio with this clear, defined vision for artistic style, dynamic, sound, musicianship. All these things that I feel like made the first two albums great.
Well, I think that happens whenever you're just in a band for a long time, especially when they're doing an album pretty much every year.
I agree.
Or, like there was a gap in this one, or I forget. But yeah, one of them has like a year in between it. Because if this was 83, then, it's in Flatfield and then Mask. So, there must have been a gap somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense, especially if Peter Murphy was ill. It's probably hard to write music as a band.
Yeah.
And, back then it's just like, hey, you got to turn on a new album this month. It's been 2 months now.
Yeah, I get that. You have record labels that are pushing you to produce content. You've signed contracts that say you'll release a certain number of albums per year. So obviously they have obligations that they have to meet. However, I just feel like they could have done a better job with this album.
I think it just fits in perfectly, honestly. I mean, the progression, it just makes sense. And it is weird that Peter Murphy doesn't sing on a ton of this album. In fact, I can only think of a few songs that he actually does.
Yeah.
And so
most of the content he does not sing on.
It's not like the singing's bad either. It's like
it's not, but
I mean,
I noticed it immediately. And maybe that's part of the reason why I don't like the album is because I love Peter Murphy's voice.
I
I love what he brings to Bauhaus, and without him singing in the band, it really kind of feels a little bit more like a Clash record to me. And I like the Clash, and I think I would like this record better if it was released by the Clash, but it's not what I wanted to hear from Bauhaus.
Yeah,
I feel like it's kind of similar to like when we were talking about Sisters of Mercy and how you wanted part 2 of their first album to be released, but Floodland is, I feel like, the natural progression for the band.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and that this is a step towards Love and Rockets, or it's kind of similar to that, especially their first album.
Yeah,
because Daniel Ashton, that group is doing most of that writing. But I feel like they did kind of have an idea of the sound they were going for, at least to some extent. Do I think that they maybe didn't complete it the way that they maybe should have? Probably.
Yeah.
They may have done their vision of it, or the idea, but I do think that it's very noticeable that stuff doesn't have lyrics for a lot of the time, it's stuff, like, it's different singers, and then
they're not used to writing lyrics to begin with in the first place, because Peter Murphy's writing a lot of lyrics at that point. And
and then you just have sections that are just go on for a while without any kind of lyrics at all, and I think that that's a little obvious. Could Hope have definitely had a lot more lyrics? I really think that song would have benefited from that.
Oh, I definitely think so.
Do I think it's a bad song? No, but do I think that adding a little more to this album would have detracted from it? No. I think that you could have added some things to this to make it sound more like a full album.
Yeah. Well, okay, this is my thing. I'm not going to make the argument that this is a bad album. I don't think this is a bad album. I just feel like the way they wrote it and Peter Murphy's absence from the album really is... It just kind of takes something away from Bauhaus, I think.
Wow, that's a very deep statement.
It's just kind of how I feel about it.
You're just like mic drop right now. I could see what you're saying. Do I agree? No. Because I did not expect you to have that opinion of this album when we first started talking about it.
I knew you would like this album when I was listening to it.
Of course you did. Like, this definitely suits me, especially because it's kind of a takeoff of... Definitely has a lot of... Especially the guitars and stuff on this. Like, are similar to Skies Gone Out. And so I really like the guitar sound and the whole band sound. I think it sounds great on this.
I think that a lot of the songs have potential to be good songs. But for me, it's really lacking Peter Murphy. There's so many songs on this album that started out, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be good. Yeah. This is what's gonna take off, and then it just kind of flatlined for me a little bit.
I can see what you're saying, but I just like the sound of this album.
Yeah.
I just really do, and yeah, it definitely kind of lacks that rawness.
Yeah.
This is probably the least raw album that they did.
Yeah.
Just because obviously the songs aren't really geared towards that way, and it seems like they were probably trying to write more melodic hits at this point. And even from the beginning, She's in Parties, if you compare that to anything that was released before it, even though the guitar is distorted and it kind of has that whiny sort of sound that they usually go for, it's just very basic. There's no issue with that. But I just compared to the other ones, it's just a lot less raw. But that's how some people like it. That's why I think it's probably their second most popular album, is because if you're into that kind of raw screaming energy, you're gonna go for In the Flap Field.
Well, and I'm case in point of that.
Exactly. And then if you want that kind of accessible Bauhaus songs, like the ones that you can kind of put on, it just kind of is a little bit catchier, maybe a little bit more sonically and dynamically mixed. You're gonna go for Burning from the Inside.
I think they're two albums for two different people, and I actually kind of like a little bit that you and I disagree on this, because we demonstrate that spectrum.
Yeah, it's true. But then, what I do like about this album a lot?
What?
I like the album cover, man. It's a cool album cover.
I will say the album art is good.
It's so cool. I like that it's, again, really different, but I do like the fact that they have the whole dark motif to it.
Yeah.
It holds up today. How In the Flap Field, I couldn't really see that album cover being.
Oh, it definitely
it wouldn't. Mask.
In the Flap Field, I could see it being released by an indie band or something. It's a first album
shock value or something. Naked Guy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel like Bauhaus was to begin with. For their time, they were the indie band. That,
I'm not standing by that statement. I'm gonna.
I'm just gonna say that album was high up on the indie chart. So
all right, we'll see. I'm not
calling them indie.
I'm not committing to any of this. I'm not part of this conversation. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. They're not indie in any way. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying they're artsy kind of band.
Yeah. So, but I do like that album cover. I think it's, again, very memorable. Especially if you see that thing on vinyl. I mean, man, that thing pops. It's really cool.
I'm looking at it right now. It's so pretty.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome. And it looks super good. It's just a good piece of art. And I know that we commented on, Mask, saying it was kind of weird in that it was kind of like a drawing. Yeah. I like The Sky's Gone Out. Obviously, it's a cool little vortex.
The Sky's Gone Out's a cool album art.
Yeah, but then this one, I just think it's really, really good in its own way. They're all good in their own way, but that one I think is probably the best album cover.
I think it's the funnest album cover of the bunch.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like it's very fitting of the time too. It's mysterious, but it's very 80s. It's not undersaturated. There's lots of.
It's 80s, but it's not 80s. Too, yeah. If that makes sense. It's so hard to explain. If anybody just go look at the cover, see what I mean. There's a reason we're gushing over it. That's pretty much my opinion of Burning from the Inside. And unless you want to say anything else about it,
I think that pretty much covers, the album.
Okay.
All right.
Let's get into Go Away White.
Okay. So I'll let you start this one, Donnie, since I started the last one. And
you want me to start
in a similar vein?
You want to start about Go Away White? Okay, so Go Away White was released in 2008. So it says 25 years after Burning from the Inside.
Yeah, immediately after Burning from the Inside is released, they break up.
Dale and Ash goes on to form Love and Rockets and do Tones on Tail. And then he
Tones on Tail initially, then Love on Rockets.
Exactly. And then he goes on to do some solo album stuff.
Yeah.
And Peter Murphy, of course, goes on to do a solo career.
Yep.
I do not feel this is a necessary album at all. And I know that everyone wants more Bauhaus. Whenever these bands come out with an album, sometimes you're like, oh, that's too familiar, right? Or it sounds so much like the other albums, you're like, or they kind of rip themselves off by accident, which happens with a lot of bands. I think my dad got the new Aerosmith album, and he said they literally rewrote Toys in the Attic or something on there.
Yeah.
And so you have these bands where they do that, and people just criticize it for being too much of the same, or just the same thing but watered down. I kind of had an issue with this album because there's a number of things. One is it feels extremely rushed, in my opinion, because the songs are extremely repetitive at some parts. I get that they're trying to do 4 to 5 minute songs because Bauhaus is popular for doing those that length of songs. They typically have a lot slower tempo for most of their songs. There's just so many songs where it just repeats the same lyrics over and over again, and I just get sick of it. And I feel like a lot of songs, even when they start out, sound very, very generic, and that's also because of the way it's mixed. It sounds everything is very
compressed.
Yeah, and it doesn't have that kind of, even though I complain about it, the dry sound of In the Flat Field doesn't have a reverby kind of thing going for it. Doesn't have a lot of chorus effects.
That is something that I also complain about on the album as well. I don't have as big a problem with the songs in the album as you do, but I definitely think that they could have produced it in a way that was probably lent itself better to the album's, reception to both audiences and critics.
Just not much I like with this album at all, unfortunately. I mean, I can't even really name a song that I would put on one of my mix CDs, and that sucks. I just think that the songs aren't as strong here, and the way it's mixed and everything definitely hurts this quite a bit. But the lyrics and just the way that they kind of slap everything together, in my opinion, almost find it boring and just irritating. I don't know how to explain it. There's just nothing I liked about this album, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really surprised. I know you have a very different opinion of what I feel.
Okay. Yeah, I do. I don't love this album. I think it's better than the last album.
I can't believe it.
By no means think that this is one of Bauhaus's great albums. I'll gladly admit that the first 3 albums are definitely their best 3 albums. But the last one I just felt like was missing Peter Murphy, and so we've got
Burning from the Inside.
Yeah. Burning from the Inside is missing Peter Murphy. I mean, he sings on a couple songs, but he doesn't really have a presence in the album, really.
Yeah.
So we have at least have him back for this album. And if you read a little bit about the album's history, they had been getting along better. So they talk about, making an album, and doing some rehearsals and stuff. And then, of course, conflict started to arise again.
Yeah.
Mostly revolving around Peter Murphy. Yeah. But, Danny Lash, like the rest of the band, they commented they were pretty pissed, and they were pretty sure they were just going to stop, making the album, that it was never going to get released. Yeah. But then Danny Lash showed up. He just started singing, and they're like, damn it. We can't not do this album.
Yeah.
Because for the first time in 25 years, they felt the energy that they used to feel. And I don't think that the album was mixed right. I agree with you. I think that this album had potential, and I agree it was rushed. And they comment on the fact that it was rushed because by the time they were done with the album, they just wanted to get it out there. They didn't want to tour. They didn't want to promote it. They just wanted it out and done with. They didn't want to talk to each other anymore.
That's just something that is so sad, though, because you have these guys who, I mean, Peter Murphy has released great albums with the solo albums.
Yeah.
They've all released great albums with Bauhaus.
Yeah.
Love and Rockets, Tone Suntail. Yeah, Dan Ash's solo albums. Yeah. You have all these great albums, and I just find it hard that they accepted. They're like, okay, well, just release it. And that's what I think is the most disappointing thing, is that they all can do an album better, but because they were like, oh, we have to make it, so just rush it and put it out there.
But that's kind of how I felt about the last album, too.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think
the other one obviously had a little more production, but the other one lacked... I feel like if the 2 albums met somewhere in the middle, we would have a good album.
Yeah.
I feel like each album has a piece of something that is essential to the Bauhaus sound, and neither of them really captures it entirely.
I just don't really agree with that. I get it. Like, some of the elements would actually be better especially if they had a little bit more Peter Murphy on the album.
A lot more. It's back to guitars and drums and bass.
Here's what I'm gonna say good things about the album to some extent, is that the album is very raw because it sounds kind of rushed. It sounds almost like a jam session that they just...
That's what it is.
Yeah,
literally.
They basically just had a jam session.
The whole album was recorded in live takes, either single or either first or second takes.
Yeah.
They never did a third take on any of the songs.
Ooh. Yeah, okay, I could see that then. I didn't know that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense of why it sounds that way.
But I also appreciate that a little bit, that they were able to put out an album that doesn't sound like complete trash, at least to me, that was recorded completely live in first and second takes.
Yeah, I
think that Bauhaus could do something better,
but I don't think that this
I don't think that this is their worst album.
I I totally think it's their worst album, unfortunately. And I really think I would feel a lot different about this album if, one, it was mixed better, if we can both agree on that.
Yeah.
But then if the lyrics were better. Like, I just find the lyrics so repetitive. And unfortunately, with songs that are 4 to 5 minutes long, I never really think, oh, when's this song over for any of their other albums? But when you're just repeating the same thing over and over again, I just start wondering that. I'm like, oh, man, just skip to the next song.
No, I could see what you're saying with that. And I agree that the lyrics suffer a little bit on this album. But at least with the last album, I was just so disappointed that half the song is instrumental, and then like there might not even be a full chorus or something. There just might be some random vocal lines thrown in, and Peter Murphy barely sings on it at all. And
I really don't think that songs really need a verse chorus kind of thing. In fact, I tend to like songs that just have one random vocal part or just work with the lyrics in their own unique way. Yeah, of course, it always has to do it well.
I
you don't think it does
feel
it well?
like it didn't do it well.
I think, like I said, I think Hope could have used some more lyrics. And I think the song Wasp on Burning From the Inside is just like 20-second instrumental.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do have things like that make it feel a little bit weird.
Yeah. But I just remember listening to Wasp, was like, why is this even on the record?
Yeah, but Go Away White is just sounds like a mess to me. And that's how I hear it. And, maybe in a few years, I mean, it's been 7 years. The album's been out for 7 years. But maybe say 3 more years, maybe when it's 10-year anniversary or something like that, I'll think differently about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe at some point I'll just...
Maybe it'll get remastered, remixed or something.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Actually, if they did that, if they kind of just, maybe just softened it up a little bit, I would probably like it a little bit more. But as it stands, Go Away White is, without a doubt, my least favorite Bauhaus album. In fact, I'll probably not play that again unless I get really curious again. But I just don't like that album at all.
I will probably never play either Burning From the Inside or this album ever again.
Wow, ooh, that's some statements. That hurts. And then also, because we talked about it with every single one of their albums, the cover's awful.
Oh, no, I definitely agree with you on this.
The cover of this album is terrible.
The cover's so bad. I think that's probably the worst part of this album.
Is the cover?
Yeah.
Good. That's funny. it just looks really bad. It's really basic. It just looks like an Instagram photo or something, just like a white blown out dress.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
You remember that band Scary Kids Scaring Kids?
No.
Okay, good.
Okay.
If anybody knows them, there's an album that I think you might see some similarities between.
Yeah, I have no idea what that is, but I'll take your word for it. So yeah, pretty much nothing from this album I would revisit.
It's definitely not a record that I would put on.
Nope. Okay, that's our opinion of Go Away White.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the 2 official live albums that were released. There's actually technically 3, because when they did their reunions of 1998, they did I think like a DVD release and like a...
There's also technically a live in the studio album.
Yeah, but the ones that we're going to be talking about is Press the Eject and Give Me the Tape, and then we're going to do the...
This Is For When.
Yeah, This Is For When. The reason I want to do these ones is because it's the 2 basically main albums that most people...
It's the main live albums that people look at.
Yeah, and so I think Closure is the other one. That's a good album too. Don't get me wrong. These are just the 2 main ones I think most people are familiar with. And it's these are the 2 that I'm the most familiar with. I'm basically just going to compare the 2 to each other because that's the easiest way to do this.
Yeah.
Here's my basic opinion of Press the Eject and Give Me the Tape. Is that I think it's a really good album.
Yeah.
It has a really good energy on it. I don't like the way it's mixed.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's pretty much my only complaint about it.
That's also your complaint of the first 2 albums.
I know. And this was released in 1982.
Yeah, and it's released as part of The Sky's Gone Out.
Yeah, it was released. I think it was packaged with it.
Yeah,
or
it's bonus disc.
Yes. That's how I had initially heard it, is because I had The Sky's Gone Out, and then it was a little release I had with it.
Yeah.
It was on CD.
Yeah.
The performances are there. They almost sound a little bit worn out, like maybe some of the energy isn't there, but that could just be in the way that the performances were recorded.
Yeah.
They're good because they have a few different dates on there, a few different shows on there. And I think it's a good listen if you're not familiar with how they would perform live.
It's a nice idea of what a Bauhaus concert would be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think, unfortunately, as a musician, because me and you, we both play guitar, drums, and things like that.
We'll probably introduce ourselves to you guys at some point.
Yeah, at some point. But I swear that sometimes the bass of the guitar is out of tune.
Well, it's David J. I mean, you know the whole stuff about how them not originally asking him to be in the band.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Because you want to have control over it. But, but I swear that on Press the Eject and Give Me the Tape, it's slightly out of tune, like the bass.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this messes with it. Like, I think that actually adds something to it in a weird way, because it shows that they kind of...
See, that's my only complaint about it. Because I like the mixing, because it's like the first two albums more.
Yeah, and, it just bugs me. Like, but I just noticed it right away.
Yeah.
And that's not like a huge complaint for a lot of people who aren't like musicians, that might not bug them.
Yeah. And even for some musicians, it might not be, because you understand the troubles of trying to stay tuned live. And
and it may just be because they push the bass too far forward in the mix that I'm just hearing it too much. But I really feel like it's like slightly out of tune.
It most likely was. I mean, like, what band is honestly, truly 100% in tune with each other live? Like,
Rush.
Okay.
So you got you there, right?
So
just because they're big nerds.
And Canadian.
Oh, that's it. That and Nickelback, right? Yeah, so that's kind of my...
Let's never mention Nickelback again on the show.
Let's make sure. My mouth hurts. But yeah, so that's pretty much my opinion of that album. It's good. It gives you a lot of songs to listen to, which I like.
No, it does. It's a great track list, and you got In the Flat Field on there, Bela Lugosi's Dead, Dark Entries, Hollow Hill, Sigma Murder, Man with X-Ray Eyes. Like, it's a solid track list.
Yeah,
like,
and I think that version of Bela Lugosi's Dead is the one that's like on a ton of compilations.
Yeah,
and things like I'm pretty sure that's the one. It sounds really similar to the later one that's released.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell which version of Bela Lugosi you're listening to.
I think they just take them all from similar tours.
Yeah.
The one they put on a lot of compilations, they don't usually put the single actually on a lot of compilations or any of the things I've ever heard. They usually will use like the live version. But then I'm just going straight into This Is For When. This is my preferred live album by them. It was released in 2009, and I love the way this album is mixed and produced, and I think it's fantastic. One of the reasons for that is not only is the way it's mixed, I think that the performances on this album are strong.
Okay, this is where I agree with you. I think that this album is better because it's a better performance, like, by and large.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest reason why this is a better album.
Right?
The mixing thing, I'll give you some leeway on that. I mean, I feel like a lot of that comes down to taste. I prefer a more raw mix, at least for Bauhaus. There are other bands where I appreciate more of the studio kind of sound, but for Bauhaus, I like a raw sounding mix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the most apparent song for this, in comparing these two albums, is the performances in Fear of Fear, because the performances between the two are so dramatically different, because the energy inside of the This Is For When, it just explodes out of the speakers.
Yeah.
Because you can just tell, like, he's just revving, he's just waiting to sing that vocal line, you know? They're just going at it. And so I think that that's the most apparent one between them both.
Yeah.
Like, Bela Lugosi's Dead, like, they always kind of put that creepy, spooky energy and everything into it. But I think that when you get into songs from Mask, where they're a little bit more kind of groovy, like dancing, it's just better on This Is For When. It's really hard for me to listen to Press the Eject and Give Me the Tape, because This Is For When does everything so much better.
No, I would agree with you on that.
You know where This Is For When does not win?
What?
The album cover.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of feel like that's a classic trope of live albums, is that they tend to lack good covers.
Yeah, I think Press the Eject and Give Me the Tape, that one has a cover that fits in with the rest of their stuff. It's just, I think it's just like Peter Murphy holding a symbol. I'm assuming it's Peter Murphy, but yeah, it's just like holding a symbol. It's all black and like grayscale. I think that fits in with the other albums a lot better. This Is For When, it's just a whole bunch of text. So
yeah, it's definitely probably their most boring album art ever.
I don't know. Go Away White.
Yeah. Well,
he's thinking about it.
I don't know. They might be tied there.
Oh, whoa.
Well, like, I don't, like, at least there's an image on Go Away White. This is just text, literally.
I guess it's true.
I don't know. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Text could be more interesting, technically.
That's right. The pen is mightier than the dress.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was so bad.
Apologize for that.
Yeah. that's my opinion of both those albums. And I think if you're gonna go for one, in fact, I think it's actually, if you want to get into Bauhaus, probably This Is For One is actually a really great album to start with, just because it gives you such an idea of the band.
It's true. I like starting people within Flatfield, but that's just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
People like stuff that people feel like you have energy or things like that. So that's our opinion of that. As far as any of the continued history of Bauhaus, there's a lot.
Yeah.
But then actually as a band, there's not much. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a lot that involves the members of the band, but as the band, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like,
yeah, exactly. We've already talked about Tones on Tail and Love and Rockets and, Peter Murphy's solo career.
Yeah.
We recommend those things. In fact, a lot of people really, really like Love and Rockets and Tones on Tail. Peter Murphy stuff is kind of hit or miss, depending, at least in my opinion. It depends on what album it is.
I feel like he was the missing component of Bauhaus, but I feel like on his own, like, he's not that interesting.
Well, he is, definitely. I mean, he's had his own hits, like Cuts You Up and things
does,
like that.
But, like, he's not, like, I don't feel like he doesn't carry the same weight as, like, someone like Ozzy Osbourne, who could walk away from Black Sabbath and then produce like, a massive solo career. Like,
I get what you're saying,
or like Morrissey, who became probably just as successful after he left the Smiths. Like,
must be the name.
Perhaps.
Peter Murphy. Like, that's a pretty average name.
It is. It's a very white name.
I wasn't gonna say it. I guess why David Bowie changed his name from David Jones.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're definitely gonna talk about every single one of those bands and albums. So definitely gonna have a Love and Rockets episode. As far as Bauhaus news, there really is none.
I mean, the only real Bauhaus news that we have is what we put up on the website, is that Daniel Ash and Haskins are going to be DJing in Hollywood October 30th.
Yeah, so
we're probably going to go to that. So
woohoo.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. So, well, I hope you've enjoyed this Bauhaus marathon of albums. This is GothCast.
Yeah.
Dr. Sanders.
This is Robbie Gore. And again, please be sure to subscribe. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube.
Oh, one thing I want to mention, just because, well, you handle pretty much all that. I pretty much just mix and create stuff.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to write a review on iTunes,
that would be awesome.
I like reading the reviews of stuff. So if you guys want to post a review on iTunes, I would very much like that.
Also, if any of you have requests or suggestions, if you go to our website, gothcastradio.com, no spaces, if you go to our About Us page, our email is listed there. It's gothcastradio@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can always email us at that email, and we will gladly respond to any questions or comments that you have.
Yeah. And of course, you can always just Facebook us too.
Yeah.
Basically, if you do through the email, you're going to get a hold of Robert really fast. If you get through the Facebook, you're probably going to get a hold of me really fast.
Yeah.
That's what I can say about that. But thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
All right. Bye.